eagerly awaiting this presentation. Could Justin Stowe, the Assistant Director for Performance Audits from the State Auditor's Office, come up and introduce yourself? And is there anyone else joining you, Justin? You're all alone?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, my name is Justin Stowe. I'm the Assistant Director of Performance Audit at the State Auditor's Office. Before we get to the charter schools report, I'm here to provide just a very brief overview, Mr. Chair, of the Performance Audit Work Plan, if that is your prerogative.
My apologies. I thought that there were other people presenting. Yes, so agenda item 1 is the audit work plan, and then we will hear the performance audit on charter school. Thank you.
Very
Sorry
good.
About that, Justin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No problem at all. Okay, so my presentation to the committee will be fairly brief today. The purpose of this presentation is essentially to give JLARC members an overview of the topics that we have now added to our current Biennium work plan. So we develop our work plan in 2-year cycles. We have recently got the new batch of performance audit topics approved by the state auditor, and so I wanted to walk you through and just provide a very high overview of what those topics include. In order just so that you're aware of the work we're doing in case members of this committee or other legislators might have input or feedback or suggestions on those topics in the future as we get ready to kick those projects off. So in my presentation, I'm going to cover kind of 3 facets. First, I'm going to talk just a little bit about how we actually select our performance audit topics at the State Auditor's Office. I'm going to highlight 4 large audits that are on that work plan that we have already begun work on, just so that you're aware of kind of what we are currently doing that was included on that work plan. I'm going to provide a very high-level summary of the other audits on that work plan and just highlight a couple that may be of interest to the committee. So first, when it comes to selecting our topics, the way that we go about this is that members of my team are constantly looking for potential audit topics that might have relevance to Washington. And our goal is to amass a very large number of those topics for consideration that we intend then to narrow down to get to our final list. We typically start, 175, 200 some topics. For this work plan, it's around 200. Those topics come to us from a variety of sources. They can come from news articles, headlines that we read. They come from the national audit conferences that me and my team attend on a regular basis. They can come from members of the legislature. They can come from statutory provisions, state agencies themselves, professional organizations, and so on. Lots of different sources that we collect that information. We then take that list and through a long process of deliberation internally and kind of considering which of those things we think would provide the most value-added topics for the state of Washington. We narrow that list to about 30 or so that we end up presenting to the state auditor. And we select those on the basis of those that we think will add the most value to improving state government. That's a big emphasis of our office and consistent with our mission to improve public trust in government. We also are looking for coverage of all major state areas of government. So we want to try to make sure that that coverage kind of covers every major facet of state government. We also want to make sure that those topics have some representation of local governments, of social equity issues, and topics that might be relevant to the tribal governments as well. Once we have selected those 30 topics that we intend to present to the state auditor, we then, my team spends more time researching those topics to develop a summary of the issue, essentially why we think the audit is important or necessary, what the audit would evaluate, and how many resources we think we need to do the project. We then take those proposals to the state auditor and her executive team for review and approval, and then once approved, those become the formal part of our work plan for the next 2 years, and that's what I'm going to be presenting to you next. So first, before I go to the summary level, I'm going to just highlight 4 audits. And again, my intent here is just to simply make you all aware of what these are. So, if you have interest in any of these topics or want more information, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm, of course, happy to answer questions at the end of this presentation to the extent I can. But really, this is just kind of an awareness. I want to make sure that you know the work that we're going to be planning to do. So I'm happy to try to answer what I can today. Always happy to consult after this presentation as well. So the first of the 4 that I want to highlight for you is an audit that we are currently working on, dealing with the operations of the Liquor and Cannabis Board. The key objective in this audit is simply to identify opportunities to help improve the board's operation and its ability to fulfill its regulatory mission to enhance public safety. This audit comes to us largely through some hotline requests received after our most recent audit. So the committee may remember that a while back we presented an audit looking at the Liquor and Cannabis Board, but really focused on their tracking system and kind of the systems they have in place to help monitor and track the product that they regulate. Following that audit, we received some complaints to our hotline and also some other participants, external and internal to the agency, that expressed some concerns. And in reviewing those, we thought that that warranted a follow-up audit. And so we are currently working on building the scope. I can't speak to those specific hotline requests. Those are confidential until the release of the audit, but that is what has brought us to that topic. Second on our list is an audit evaluating oversight of authorized entities serving students with disabilities. Again, committee members might remember that in 2023, Senate Bill 5315 gave OSPI some additional oversight over these authorized entities, which are essentially contractors that provide special education services. There were some media reports at the time, some concerns about how students were being restrained and some other issues kind of along the quality of services being provided. And so the legislature gave OSPI some additional monitoring and regulatory oversight of those entities, and then included in that bill an audit requirement to have us evaluate how that has been working in terms of how they are now regulating those and whether they're actually meeting the requirements of that bill. That has a statutory deadline of November 30th, 2026, so we have gotten that started right away to make sure that we are ready to report out to the legislature well ahead of that deadline. Third is a look at the Quality Home Care Initiative, commonly referred to as Initiative 1163. We have an existing statutory mandate to conduct an audit of Initiative 1163 every 2 years, and so we have conducted numerous audits through our performance audit function and our accountability audit function, taking a look at certain provisions of Initiative 1163. In this case, this year, we wanted to take a little bit bigger step back and actually look at whether or not the goals of Initiative 1163 are actually being filled. In other words, are the elderly folks and those with disabilities who are in long-term care, are they receiving better protections as a result of this act? So really just trying to go back and take a broader look at whether this has been effective in achieving its initial outcome. We're also going to take a look at the home care aid certification process, because that's a key component of that initiative as we do that work. And then finally, the last large audit that is currently underway I want to bring to your attention is an audit looking at Medicaid managed care and the fee-for-service delivery models. And so in Washington, we provide many of our services through the managed care model, as do many other states. But with the changing environment and obviously a lot of pressure on budgets, we wanted to look at some cost issues related to Medicaid. And so this is one that we thought might be valuable, is to evaluate the cost difference between a managed care and a fee-for-service delivery model for selected Medicaid programs. We are aware, of course, that there's only one factor of several, including access to care and quality of care, that are factors that are relevant to that discussion. So we're also going to explore, to some degree, those factors, not specifically evaluate them. That would be too much for the scope of a single audit, but we're aware that that exists. We're also going to explore factors that may influence those cost differences between those two models of care, look at models used in other states, identify any populations that are currently served under managed care where it might be a more cost-effective option to serve them under fee-for-service without potentially compromising access or quality of care. So those are 4 current audits that are on our work plan that my teams are engaged in working on right now. So if you have input or thoughts on those, please feel free to reach out to me. That's why I want to highlight them, because they are currently ongoing. From this point forward in my presentation, I'm just going to give you the summary list of the rest of these topics. Most of these have not been started, and they may not get started for quite some time. So again, mostly just want you aware of these in case any particular topic catches your eye. Just a little bit of orientation before I begin. On the left side of this table, you'll notice just some icons which just represent the government sector. And so this speaks to my earlier point. We try to make sure we have topics that cover that wide array of government services. You also notice to the right of the table the unique aspects column. That just simply highlights certain dynamics or characteristics of these proposals that we have flagged because we think they help accomplish other objectives in our work plan. So for example, the legislature recently passed with our support Senate Bill 5414, which requires us to consider social equity as one of the now 10 factors that we look at per the I-900 requirements that fund our function. We also try to flag any topics that have a local government nexus or that might involve tribal governments or might have a cost savings component to them. So that's on the right side of that table just to give you a little better sense of some other kind of additional characteristics that may be of interest. You'll notice this year's work plan, and again, there's 24 topics in total, so beyond the 4 I've already presented, there'll be 20 more. We'll cover through the following tables. One audit on a work plan dealing with agriculture, you see there at the top, animal disease monitoring and response. The second in that list, one looking at the government sector of economic development. And then we have 4 here that are dealing with general operations. And one that I wanted to highlight for the committee specifically on this list is the follow-up audit on the Housing Commission tenant ownership audit. You all recall we presented that to you not long ago, made several recommendations to the commission, and we wanted to follow up to ensure that we have the appropriate status of whether those recommendations are being followed. And in particular, we also wanted to look at whether any of these properties have been transferred to the tenants since the time of our audit, because there were many that were eligible, but that had not happened at the time. And so we're going to come back and take a second look at that. On the second here, you'll notice we have another Medicaid topic at the top, and then we have 4 health and human services that are not Medicaid specific. We actually break those into 2 categories because that's a broad sector of government services. The one on this list that I thought I would highlight for you is this one dealing with exponential growth in the DSHS vendor payments. And so we have a data scientist on staff at the State Auditor's Office who is constantly looking through state agency procurement data, expenditure data, to just look for patterns that we think might merit additional attention. The exponential growth pattern can be an indication of a misappropriation of assets, fraud when someone is out stealing money and they get away with it. That can embolden them, and so you can see these exponential patterns. It is, of course, no indication in and of its own that that is happening, but it is something that sometimes merits further consideration. So we have this test being run against all expenditures, and this one came to our attention. There was just a large number of vendors. And so the purpose of this audit is really just to dive further and work with DSHS to just make sure we understand the circumstances and to make sure that everything is in order. So don't want to make it sound like we think there's something that is happening there. It's just something we test for, but kind of a newer function in our office to be trying to kind of always looking at some of those expenditure patterns to make sure everything is in good order from the state's fiscal perspective. The third set of topics here, we have 1 dealing with higher education and then 4 that are dealing with K-12 education. One that I wanted to highlight for you is one of the topics on our work plan this year that we've intentionally added under consultation with the Whitener Group, some consultants we've hired to help us better engage tribal governments when it comes to our performance audit work. And so this is one that they thought would have kind of broad interest from the tribal government perspective, is simply looking at the implementation of the since time immemorial curriculum. According to state law, all school districts are required to teach this curriculum. But recent news outlets, media reports have suggested that that's not been done in its entirety in any district potentially, and definitely not large scale across all districts. And so we want to look into that issue and evaluate the extent to which that curriculum has been actually implemented, and if not, what the barriers and obstacles might be that is preventing that from occurring. And then finally, a couple of topics here dealing with public safety, and then a couple dealing with transportation. One here that I would highlight is just an audit looking at the Washington state ferry system. In Washington, we have the largest ferry system in the nation, not surprisingly maybe. And a number of media outlets over the years have highlighted certain concerns with the ferry system, not surprising, maybe because of its size and the magnitude of all the things that it covers and has to do. So we wanted to take a look at this particular issue and just see if there's potential areas where the ferry system's operations could be improved or enhanced. We will work with agency officials in determining that scope as we get to that audit. It's kind of you see the designation as a broad audit, which just means that we still don't have audit objectives. We just know that we'd like to audit something related to the ferry system, and so we'll work with agency officials, stakeholders, and others to determine that when the time comes. On a final note, I just want to let members know that we do maintain a webpage on our website, and the URL is here for your reference later on, that shows all the projects that we are currently working on in our office. And so if you want to see the work product that is currently being done, including the 4 that I've discussed today and many others that we started quite a while back, You can go to that website. It will provide a brief abstract for each of those audits, as well as a one-page summary of kind of what the issues are and what the audit objectives are that we intend to address. So it can be a good source of information if you're curious what work we're working on. Also, as we get closer to completion of that, we will add our anticipated publication date, so the date in which we will release that to the public, as well as the date in which we will be presenting it to you. So that is a resource for you if you're curious what work we are doing and what is coming up on the horizon. I have a contact slide here. You're free to reach out to any of the members on this slide. Highlight Scott Nelson, who is the director of our Legislative and Policy Affairs Office. He's always a good resource for you, but you can always, of course, reach out to me or my boss, Scott Frank, if you have any other questions about our work plan, any topics on that, have any input or suggestions or other things you'd like us to hear. So that concludes my presentation, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to answer any questions that I can.
Do we have any online questions? Barnard? Justin, could you share, there were so many audits being listed that I lost track of which ones had overlaps with JLARC audits. But could you share in how, when you're assembling potential topics, how you consider the potential for an overlap with JLARC, and how you then proceed, what coordination there is, et cetera?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a couple steps we take in that regard. So as we get close, about the point where we have those 30 topics decided, so we've whittled it down from the, the much larger set of 200 some down to the 30 that we think merits our executive leadership's consideration. I will reach out to Eric or members of his staff and ask if we can get a copy of their work plan so we can compare. And actually this year we ended up taking a topic off of our list. So we generally do not. We either want to coordinate very closely with the members of JLARC, or we want to avoid any duplication of effort entirely. And so we actually ended up pulling off a topic because one that we thought would make a great audit turned out had already been on JLARC's consideration. So we have to kind of wait for the timing for that to line up, obviously, because we have to wait till they kind of know what they're going to do. So we have some coordination in that way as we're completing the work plan to look exactly for those situations, Mr. Chairman. Also, I send out a monthly update to Mr. Thomas and his team just about what audits we have ongoing, so that is constantly in front of them. I just sent one out today just to let them know what work we're doing in case that sparks anything that we may have missed, or something comes up, or just make sure we're coordinated in that way. And then we also meet on a quarterly basis just to make sure that we're coordinating efforts and are kind of aware of what our different groups are doing and making sure that we're as coordinated as we can be. So,
thank you. Any other questions? And if legislators want to contact you with suggestions, I just want to say there are a number of topics there that are on as a result of discussions I've been engaged with the SAO on. And the State Auditor's Office is very proactive and seeks out that input, comes back to legislators who are interested in a topic, even if they didn't ask for that audit, and to get input in terms of scoping questions. So I just want to make sure that legislators know that this process is open, and even if you didn't suggest a topic, having input to scoping is possible and often sought out by the SAO. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.